The train's whistle was the only thing alive in that frozen hour. Steam rolled across the platform like a ghost dragging its breath through the snow. When the door opened, Eleanor Whitmore stepped down carefully, one gloved hand on the railing, the other pressed over the gentle swell beneath her coat. She was 56, gray as the morning, her hair bound in a loose braid that glimmered silver under the lantern light. Behind her, the conductor glanced once and shook his head. "No one here for you, ma'am," he muttered and pulled the door shut. The train clattered off into the white distance, leaving only the hiss of wind and the faint cry of iron wheels fading away. She stood there, a small shape in a sea of falling snow, her boots already sinking past the ankles. Every flake that landed on her lashes melted slow, like tears that had forgotten what heat felt like. Inside the station, warmth flickered through fogged windows. A few townsfolk lingered, waiting for letters, parcels, anything that gave reason to stay indoors. Their chatter slowed when they saw her through the glass. The whispers began as softly as the snowfall. "She's with child. Lord, look at her age. Shame's got no winter, I could guess." Eleanor heard nothing but caught the tone, the pity that dressed itself as righteousness. Her back straightened against the wind, though her shoulders ached from the long ride. The station door opened with a creak. Martha Hensley, the matron, bustled out in a shawl too bright for such a day. "Come inside, dear," Martha called, forcing a smile. "You'll freeze out here." Eleanor hesitated. The scent of coal smoke and wet wool tempted her, but something in those waiting eyes stopped her at the threshold. She thanked the woman softly, voice trembling like a cracked bell, and stepped in anyway. The warmth struck her face, almost painful. Snow dripped from her hair to the wood floor. A girl of 10, Ruthie, was sweeping near the stove, her thin hands red from cold. The child watched Eleanor as if she were some rare animal blown in by the storm. "Ma'am, you want coffee?" the girl asked. Before Eleanor could answer, a man near the window snorted. She ought to want shame buried first. Laughter followed, low and sharp. The matron's smile wilted. She whispered, "Pay no mind. Folks here forget their manners come winter." Eleanor nodded and sat on the far bench, folding her coat close. Her hands trembled as she reached into her bag, a small leather pouch with frayed stitching. Inside was a folded note, worn soft by weeks of hope. A promise from the man who had sworn he'd meet her here, marry her before the baby came. He'd stopped writing 2 months ago. The ink was still faintly smudged where her tears had touched it. The matron cleared her throat and offered a cup of weak tea. "You've come a far way, I suppose." "From Abilene," Eleanor said. "I thought there'd be someone waiting. Sometimes men talk more than they mean." Martha looked toward the door as if afraid someone would overhear. "You rest here till the weather breaks." But rest didn't come. The storm thickened. Train stopped running for the night. The townsfolk left one by one, their faces vanishing into veils of snow. By dusk, only Eleanor remained on the bench, eyes unfocused, staring at her reflection in the frosted glass. The station clock ticked heavy, each swing of the pendulum counting down her pride. Outside, the world turned silver and gray. The lantern by the platform swayed in the wind, light bending with every gust. Eleanor rose slowly, joints aching, and walked back into the storm. The cold met her like punishment. She pulled her shawl tight, boots creaking through drifts. The tracks stretched empty as far as she could see. In that vast silence, a thought came, half prayer, half resignation. Maybe this is how the good Lord takes pity, letting the world grow too quiet to hear its own cruelty. Snow gathered on her shoulders, her hair stiff with frost. She tried to lift her feet faster but stumbled once, catching herself on a post. Her breath came short. The child within her shifted, a reminder that she was not entirely alone. She saw the flicker first, a moving shadow beyond the ridges cutting through white blur. A horse, dark and immense, its mane wild with snow. Then the rider came into focus, bare-chested despite the storm, skin bronzed against the pallid dusk, long black hair whipping in the wind. An Apache, she realized, and the old fear the town had taught her stirred beneath her ribs. He rode closer, his face unreadable, eyes amber under the fading light. The horse stopped a few paces away. Neither spoke. Steam rose between them, from the horse's nostrils, from her trembling lips. The man swung down from the saddle with the quiet ease of someone who moved like weather itself. He studied her without cruelty, only a measured stillness. "You'll die standing here," he said at last, voice deep and even. "I've nowhere else to go." He looked past her toward the town lights, faint in the distance, then back to her face. "They will not help you." She pressed a hand to her belly. "No, they already have." Her laugh was brittle, breaking halfway through. The man's jaw tightened, not in anger, but something close to understanding. He reached out, then paused midair as if permission mattered more than rescue. "You carry life," he said softly. "The storm doesn't forgive that." "I don't deserve forgiveness," she murmured. "Then deserve breath," he answered. His hand finally closed around hers, warm, impossibly steady. For a moment, time stopped. The snow seemed to hush, as if the world leaned closer to listen. He guided her toward his horse. The touch was firm but careful, like leading someone back from a cliff. She stumbled once, and he caught her by the waist. The contact startled her, the feel of strength that wasn't ownership, a protection that asked for nothing. When he lifted her onto the saddle, she caught the scent of pine smoke and leather on him, a memory of warmth she hadn't known in years. He mounted behind her, his arms braced on either side, not trapping but shielding her from the wind. "Why are you helping me?" she asked over the storm. He didn't answer immediately. Only the rhythm of the horse and the hiss of snow filled the silence. Then, close to her ear, almost lost in the wind, he said, "Because you looked at death as if it were a friend." Her eyes burned. She bit her lip, fighting the cry that rose in her throat. The world blurred white again, and they rode into it, leaving the empty station and its whispers behind. Hours blurred into the rhythm of hooves. The land was all ghost and silver. She thought she saw lights once, maybe a house, maybe memory, but the snow swallowed it. She leaned back, exhausted, feeling his heartbeat steady against her spine. When at last they slowed, the wind had died. The silence felt enormous. Ahead, dark pines framed a small clearing where an abandoned cabin crouched under a drifted roof. Smoke rose faintly from its chimney, like a secret kept too long. He dismounted and turned to lift her down. Her legs failed beneath her, and he caught her easily, holding her until she found her footing. "You'll stay warm here," he said. "And you." "I have fire enough." His gaze lingered, not bold, not shy, just seeing her the way one might see the first light after night too long. The child within her moved again, a quiet kick. Eleanor looked away, ashamed of the flicker of hope warming through the cold. She wanted to speak, to ask his name, to thank him, but the words tangled in her throat. He nodded toward the door. "Go inside." She obeyed, though she turned once more, needing to know this wasn't some fever dream conjured by loneliness. The snow softened between them, wind whispering through pine boughs. He stepped closer, close enough that his breath touched the edge of her hair. His voice came low, a whisper meant only for her. "If you want to live, act like you're mine." The words struck through her, half command, half salvation. For the first time all day, she felt heat rise beneath her skin, not from shame, but from something dangerously alive. Outside, the storm roared again, swallowing the world. Inside the cabin, a single candle flickered to life, its glow trembling across her face as she turned toward the door, half frightened, half found. And for the first time in years, she didn't feel old at all. The storm followed them like a living thing, snarling through the trees as they rode. The horses' hooves sank deep into the drifts, each step a quiet battle. Eleanor clung to the saddle horn, her hands raw from the cold, her breath shallow. Tahu's presence behind her was steady, a wall of heat in a world gone white. When a cabin appeared through the curtain of snow, it looked less like shelter and more like a forgotten prayer answered too late. Inside, the air was still, heavy with the scent of pine resin and damp ashes. Tahu moved first, striking flint, coaxing a spark until fire crawled up the wood like light learning how to live again. Orange warmth spilled over rough walls, touching her face, her trembling hands, the curve of her swollen belly. She lowered herself to the floor near the hearth, too tired to speak. He worked in silence, every motion precise. He took off his snow-crusted boots, unstrapped a satchel, and laid a strip of dried venison on a plate. His hair clung to his shoulders, black as wet ink, his skin bronzed and scarred by old stories. Eleanor's eyes lingered on the long scar over his collarbone. It looked like something earned, not survived. When he finally looked up, she flinched, embarrassed by her own staring. He said nothing, only poured hot water into a tin cup and handed it to her. Steam rose between them, softening the edges of their silence. She murmured, "You should have left me at the station." He stirred the fire with a stick, sparks rising like startled birds. "You would have frozen before morning. Maybe that would have been easier." He turned his gaze toward her, slow, deliberate. For who? She had no answer. The question hung there, sharp as the wind outside. When the food was ready, he offered her a bowl first. She tried to hold it steady, but her hands betrayed her. The broth sloshed onto her skirt, steaming against the fabric. Shame flared. She braced for his irritation. Instead, he took the bowl back, wiped it clean with the edge of his blanket, and refilled it. No words, just patience. "You don't even know me," she whispered. "I don't need to." He gestured toward her belly. "You carry life. That's enough." His tone wasn't tender. It was factual like weather. But it cracked something open inside her, something that had been bricked in by judgment and fear. She sipped the broth slowly, feeling heat trickle back in her bones. Outside, the wind shifted, moaning against the shutters. The storm was worse now. The cabin creaked, as if remembering all the winters it had already survived. Eleanor's eyes closed for a moment. Behind her eyelids came the voices of the town. The laughter, the whispers, the words Sin mouthed like it tasted sweet to them. "You hate them," she said quietly. "No," Tahu replied. "I pity them. They've forgotten how small they are." She opened her eyes to find him sitting across from her, elbows on his knees, watching the fire. The glow painted his face in gold and shadow. "You speak good English," she said, trying to fill the silence. "I learned it from soldiers. They burned my village. I made sure I'd understand what they said before they came again." The admission was calm, but the air seemed to tighten. Eleanor's breath caught. "I'm sorry," she said, though she knew her apology meant little. He looked at her fully now, and in his eyes was no blame. "You didn't light the match." Her throat ached. She wanted to ask, "Why help me then?" But the question felt cruel. Instead, she reached toward the fire, palms open. The heat licked her skin, and she imagined it burning away her shame. "Sleep," he said after a while. "You need strength." "I can't," she admitted. "Every time I close my eyes, I hear them." He tilted his head. "The ones who left you." She nodded. "The father, the town. God, maybe. I don't know who I keep expecting to come back." He rose, crossed to a shelf, and took down a folded blanket. It was patched in places, the stitching uneven. He draped it gently over her shoulders. His hand brushed the side of her neck, a touch so light it might have been accidental, but it lingered just long enough to steady her breath. "You will rest," he said, not commanding but promising. She did, eventually. The fire's crackle lulled her, and for the first time in weeks, her body loosened. Outside, the snow built walls around the cabin. Inside, warmth and silence wove a fragile peace. Tahu stayed awake, sitting near the door, carving something with his knife. Eleanor drifted in and out of sleep, catching fragments, the sound of wood scraping, the low hum of an Apache melody, the rhythm of his breathing like the pulse of the earth itself. When she woke again, hours later, dawn was only a gray whisper behind the frost-covered window. Her belly ached, a dull pull beneath the ribs. Tahu was still there, knife in hand, a small figure of wood now resting in his palm. "What is it?" she asked. He set it beside her gently, a tiny carving of a woman with a child pressed to her chest. "Protection," he said. She traced its outline, rough but tender. Her eyes filled. You believe in such things? I believe in what survives. Something shifted inside her then, small but irreversible, a quiet acceptance that maybe survival was a kind of grace too. Later, when she tried to stand, her knees buckled. Tahu caught her before she fell, his arm circling her waist. The heat of him was startling. For an instant, her cheek brushed his bare chest. The pulse beneath his skin thundered steady and sure. She stepped back, flustered. I'm sorry. He gave the faintest smile. For what? For needing someone. He didn't reply. Instead, he turned to the door, listening. Wind still wailed outside, but beneath it was another sound, a distant echo like hooves or the groan of wagons. His shoulders tensed. What is it? She asked. Men, he said. From town, maybe. Her stomach nodded. They'll come for me. He looked at her calmly. Let them. You're not theirs anymore. The simplicity of the statement made her heart stutter. She clutched the carving tight, as if it were proof she still existed. He began packing quietly, loading the rifle, checking the horse's reins. She watched him, fear and gratitude tangling in her chest. Why do you keep helping me? She asked. He paused, eyes still on the fire. Because you remind me of my mother. She too was left in the snow, but no one came for her. The words landed heavy. Eleanor's throat closed around them. She wanted to speak, to thank him, to reach for him, but the world outside cracked open with a sudden gust that rattled the cabin walls. He moved to the window, peering into the white distance. His breath fogged the glass. They'll reach us by nightfall, he said. She stepped beside him, close enough that their shoulders brushed. Through the swirling snow, faint figures moved on the ridge, 3, maybe 4. What will you do? She whispered. Tahu's jaw tightened, but his voice stayed calm. What I must. She pressed a trembling hand over her belly, feeling the child shift again, as if it, too, could sense the storm changing shape. Outside, the wind screamed through the pines. Inside, the firelight trembled over 2 faces, one lined by years, one carved by loss, both waiting for something neither could name. And when the first echo of gunfire cracked through the snow-heavy air, Eleanor didn't flinch. She just whispered, they found us. Tahu turned his head, eyes steady, and said, then we'll show them what they left behind. Morning broke like a bruise, soft violet bleeding into gray. The storm had passed, leaving the world blank and breathless. The pines dripped with thawing frost, and the cabin walls glowed faintly under the first hesitant light. Eleanor stirred to the sound of Tahu sharpening his knife, the slow rhythm of stone against steel steady as a heartbeat. She rose carefully, wrapping the blanket around her shoulders. Her body ached from sleep and the weight of fear that had not yet loosened. The memory of gunfire still lived in her chest, the single echo that had torn through the storm before vanishing into silence. No one had come to the door that night, but both knew it was only a matter of time. Toe didn't look up when she spoke. They won't stop looking, will they? No, he said simply. They've seen me with you. To them, that's enough. Eleanor's hands tightened around the blanket. To call it sin again. He set the knife aside and stood, his full height filling the space. They don't know sin, only fear dressed as decency. His voice was low but sure, and she found herself studying the way his words carried calm instead of bitterness. She envied it. Her own heart still trembled from years of judgment, the way pity and disgust had braided themselves into the sound of her name. Tahu crossed to the hearth, crouching to feed the fire. His back was scarred, lines of healed pain tracing old wars. She wanted to ask about them, to know how a man could bear so much and still speak softly. But the question died when he turned, holding out a wooden figure, smaller now, finer carved than the one before. He placed it in her hands, a woman kneeling, her hair flowing like water, a child resting safely against her chest. For strength, he said. Eleanor stared at it, touched by the imperfect beauty. You carve life like you've lost it before. His eyes flicked toward the window, the pale world beyond it. I have. Silence hung between them, not heavy, but reverent. She ran her thumb over the figure's edges, the wood warm from his hands. Later, when they stepped outside, the air cut clean and sharp. Snow sparkled on every branch, glittering under a sun too weak to melt it. The horse grazed near the trees, steam curling from its nostrils. Eleanor moved slowly, testing her legs, feeling the weight of her child shift. Tahu gathered wood without speaking. His movements were deliberate, patient. She noticed how he kept glancing toward the distant ridge, the same place the figures had appeared. His watchfulness was quiet, never frantic. It comforted her more than she wished to admit. By mid-morning, a faint crunch of boots broke the stillness. She froze. Tahu's head lifted. 3 riders emerged from the trees, 2 deputies and Sheriff Benton himself. Their coats were rimmed with frost, their expressions grim. Eleanor Whitmore. Benton called, his voice sharp as ice. "You're to come with us." Tahu stepped forward, placing himself between them and the cabin. "She stays." The sheriff's hand drifted toward his revolver. "You think you can hide her, Apache? She's a woman in trouble." "This ain't your concern." Eleanor's throat tightened. The shame she thought she'd buried flared hot again, searing through her ribs. She moved past Tahu before she could lose her nerve. "He saved my life," she said, loud enough to carry. "If there's trouble, it's yours for not helping me when I asked." The deputies shifted uncomfortably. Benton spat into the snow. "You've no right talking that way, ma'am. You need a doctor, a priest, something." Her voice steadied, trembling only with truth. "I need neither. I need peace. And I found it here." The words seemed to surprise even her. Tahu's gaze flickered, unreadable but proud. Benton looked from one to the other, as though trying to fit them into a law that couldn't hold them. "You're making a mistake," he said finally. "Folks already think you're. I know what they think." Her breath clouded the air, fierce and visible. But they stopped thinking when they started whispering. The sheriff hesitated, then turned his horse. "I'll be back," he warned. "This ain't finished." When they rode off, their figures swallowed by white, Eleanor sagged. Tahu caught her elbow before she fell. "You faced them," he said. "I don't know if I did it for me or for you." "Both," he replied. "Dignity doesn't ask who deserves it." They went inside, shutting out the cold. The silence afterward was softer, filled with the crackle of fire and the smell of melting snow on boots. Eleanor sat near the hearth, unwrapping her shawl. Her hands trembled, not from fear this time, but from something freer, almost defiant. Tahu poured her tea. His fingers brushed hers, and she felt that strange, unspoken current again, the one that seemed to move between them without needing words. "I don't understand you," she murmured. "You don't need to," he said with a faint smile. "You only need to remember yourself." She turned to the window, where daylight danced faintly across the snow. "I used to," she said, "before they told me what a woman should be." "And what is that?" "Silent," she whispered. "Grateful for crumbs. Sorry for breathing." He was quiet for a moment, then said, "You're none of those things now." Eleanor laughed softly, surprised by the sound. "No, I suppose I'm not." When evening came, the sky deepened to indigo, stars pricking through like tiny flames. The storm clouds had cleared, leaving a strange stillness, the kind that feels like a held breath. She found herself humming an old hymn while she mended one of Tahu's shirts. He watched her from the doorway, his expression unreadable but softened. "You sing like someone remembering," he said. "Maybe I am." He nodded once, then looked out toward the forest. "They'll come again. When they do, you must stand where you stood today. Don't bow." "I won't," she said quietly. "Not anymore." He turned back to her. "Then you are stronger than most." She felt the warmth rise in her chest again. Different this time, not the burn of shame, but the pulse of something being born. As the night deepened, she felt her child stir more often, restless beneath her ribs. She whispered to it, half to herself, "You'll be born in spring. I'll make sure you see sunlight before judgment." Tao looked up. "You speak to the child. I speak to whoever still listens." He came closer, kneeling beside her chair. "Then speak to yourself, too." Her eyes met his. For a heartbeat, neither looked away. The air between them thickened with unspoken truths. How loneliness recognizes its twin, How two broken lives can mirror grace without touching. When he finally rose, he moved to check the rifle again, his silhouette framed by firelight. The muscles in his back caught the glow, his strength quiet, almost holy in its restraint. Outside, the wind began to whisper again, not the wild rage of the storm, but the gentle hum of snow sliding off branches. It sounded like the world exhaling. Eleanor stood, moving to the door. She looked out over the clearing, the place that had once been her prison, now soft and glowing with peace. The horizon pulsed faintly with moonlight, silver over the drifts. "I used to think dignity was given," she said softly, more to herself than to him. "I see now it's something you take back." Tahu came to stand beside her. "It never leaves," he said. "It waits." They stayed that way for a long time, side by side, breathing the same cold air. In the distance, a coyote called, a long, lonely sound that faded into silence. Then came the faintest echo of hooves again, distant but certain. Tahu's head turned toward the noise. "They're early." Eleanor didn't flinch. She reached for his arm, steady this time. "Let them come." He looked down at her hand, small, pale, lined with years of sorrow and endurance. When he spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. "They'll see what I see, Eleanor Whitmore." "And what's that?" He met her gaze, eyes molten in the firelight. A woman the storm couldn't break. The sound of hooves drew closer, breaking the stillness. The fire guttered once, its glow trembling across the walls. Eleanor turned toward the door, her breath slow, steady. "Then let's remind them." Outside, the darkness stirred. Somewhere beyond the trees, men called her name. But for the first time, it didn't sound like shame, it sounded like fear. The snow came again by nightfall, thick and soundless, erasing every trail that led to the cabin. Eleanor sat by the fire, her hands pressed over her belly, feeling the faint rhythm of life inside her, a heartbeat that answered the storm's muffled roar. Tahu stood at the window, rifle in hand, watching the tree lean. His breath fogged against the glass, but his eyes stayed sharp, amber in the flicker of flame. "They'll come at dawn," he said. She looked up. "And if they do, then the storm won't be the only thing they'll remember." She wanted to tell him not to fight, that she had lost too much blood and soul to another man's pride, but the words wouldn't come. There was something sacred about his stillness, the way he stood between her and the world without asking for reason or thanks. He was both her shield and her reflection, both outcasts, both misunderstood, both breathing against the cold. The fire cracked. Outside, the wind moaned like a choir of ghosts. Tahu's horse shifted restlessly in the lean-to, snorting steam. Eleanor's mind wandered to the life she'd left behind. The ranch house with its long, empty hallways, the graves on the hill, the laughter that had turned to gossip. She had been a woman of standing once, until love made her foolish and age made her shameful. Yet now, in this wilderness, with her hair silver and her body heavy with child, she felt more alive than she ever had in the gilded rooms of her past. Tahu turned from the window and knelt beside her. "You're afraid," he said, not accusingly, but as though naming the truth might calm it. "I'm tired," she whispered. "Tired of being something to whisper about." He reached for her hands. His palms were calloused, warm. "You don't belong to their stories anymore." Her eyes filled. "Then where do I belong?" He hesitated, then pressed her hand against his chest, where his heartbeat thudded steady as a drum. "Here," he said simply. Before she could answer, a noise shattered the quiet. A gun cocking outside, metal on metal. Tahu moved to the door in one fluid motion. Eleanor rose, heart pounding, the baby shifting like a tide inside her. 3 shadows appeared through the snow, men wrapped in furs and anger. The leader, a broad-shouldered rancher with a red scarf, called out, "Send her out, Apache. The woman's carrying what ain't yours." Eleanor felt her stomach twist. She knew that voice. Silas Drew, the man who had promised marriage, then vanished with her savings and her reputation. He had found her. Tahu opened the door just enough to speak. "She's not yours to claim." Silas spat into the snow. Everything she carries belongs to me. Eleanor stepped forward before Tahu could stop her. No, she said, her voice shaking but loud enough to carry. You left me, Silas. You left your child. You'll leave empty again. The men laughed, cruel and hollow. You hear that? Silas sneered. She thinks a savage makes her holy. Tahu's jaw tightened. Leave now, he said quietly. Silas raised his rifle. Then I'll take her first. The shot cracked through the storm. Wood splintered beside Tahu's shoulder. He moved with sudden grace, slamming the door shut and dropping the bar across it. Stay back, he told her. No, Eleanor said, trembling. If you fight, I fight too. He turned toward her, eyes fierce. You'll fight by living. Snow burst through a broken window as another shot hit the frame. Tahu fired back once, clean, precise. One of the men outside screamed and fell. The others cursed, retreating behind the drifted fence. Silence returned for a heartbeat, broken only by Eleanor's ragged breathing. She sank to her knees, pain tightening her stomach. Tahu, she gasped. It's starting. He dropped the rifle instantly and knelt beside her. Now, she nodded, sweat glistening on her pale forehead. Too soon. He spread blankets near the fire, hands steady though his face had gone pale. Breathe, he whispered. I'll hold the door. Outside, the storm howled louder, masking every sound but her voice and the wind's roar. Hours blurred into pain and firelight. Tahu moved between the hearth and her side, boiling water, muttering prayers in Apache, his words a rhythm she clung to. When her strength faltered, he took her hand. You can do this, he said. Her eyes met his. Stay with me. I will. Her cry rose with the storm, a raw, human sound that carried through the cabin, through the woods, through the snow that buried every sin and rumor that had ever chased her. When it ended, silence fell again, deep, stunned silence. A child's cry broke it. Small, fragile, alive. Eleanor's breath hitched. Tahu placed the infant in her arms, wrapped in his own shirt. She stared down at the tiny face, at the small fingers curling instinctively around her thumb. Tears spilled freely down her cheeks. She's here, she whispered. She's real. Tahu smiled faintly, exhaustion softening his features. A storm-born child, he said. Strong already. Eleanor looked up at him. You saved us. He shook his head. You saved yourself. I only watched. For a long moment, neither spoke. Outside, dawn began to bloom faintly over the mountains, pink and gold seeping through the storm's remnants. Snowflakes drifted lazily past the window now, no longer cruel, just quiet. Tahu knelt beside her, his hair falling loose over his shoulders. You'll have to leave soon, he said. The sheriff will come again. Eleanor shook her head. Let him come. I'm not hiding anymore. He studied her face, then nodded slowly. Then I'll stay until he does. Her hand found his wrist. And after, he hesitated, eyes soft. After, wherever you go, the wind will carry my name beside yours. She smiled weakly. That sounds like forever. He didn't answer, only reached to brush a strand of silver hair from her face. His touch lingered, reverent. When they ask who she belongs to, he said, glancing at the sleeping baby, what will you tell them? Eleanor looked toward the window, where the dawn had fully claimed the world. The light kissed the snow, turning it gold. I'll tell them she was born for mercy, she said. And mercy doesn't belong to anyone. Tahu's gaze held hers. Then neither do you. For a moment, the world seemed perfectly still, the fire burning low, the storm dissolving in a mist, the sound of new life breathing softly in her arms. Then, from the ridge, came the echo of hooves again. She turned, heart tightening. Tahu rose, gripping his rifle. They're coming back. Eleanor stood too. The child pressed her chest. Let them see, she said. Let them see what they tried to bury. He looked at her. This woman who had once trembled before gossip and now stood unflinching before death. Something in his face broke and meant it all at once. He bowed his head slightly, voice low. Then by the spirits and by the storm, I vow, they won't touch you while I draw breath. Snow swirled around them, caught in the rising wind. The door shuddered under the force of the approaching riders. Eleanor placed a hand on his arm. "And if you fall?" He smiled, quiet and sure. "Then the storm keeps my vow." The door rattled again, harder this time. Light spilled through the cracks. Morning now, fierce and unrelenting. Eleanor looked down at the baby, then at the man beside her, then at the door that would soon give way. Her fear was gone, replaced by something shining, unbreakable. "Then let them come," she whispered. "We have already won." The wind screamed once more, carrying their breath, their vow, their defiance into the endless white.